Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first of our monthly library telescope presentations. We're thrilled to have you folks here and the interest that you have in the Library Telescope Award as well as the program. So this presentation will mainly be about the Astronomical League's new Library Telescope Award. But I think we have a lot of people who are going to be participating and viewing this who maybe aren't even Astronomical League members. So I'll talk a little bit about the Library Telescope program and the Astronomical League as well as I get started here. So if you would please hold your questions till the end. Don will read the questions. You just put them into the chat area, and at the end we'll deal with the questions. I anticipate speaking for about 15 to 20 minutes. And we're hoping that we spend a lot more time than that answering questions. As I said, this is the first of our monthly Library Telescope presentations. The next one will be on Wednesday, October 21st, at the same time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And the topic will be how to launch a Library Telescope program. Okay, so the Astronomical League is an umbrella organization that has about 280 astronomy clubs or organizations. And that covers almost 18,000 members. So there's quite a few people involved in it. And among the many benefits of being a member of the Astronomical League, there are over 70 observing and program awards that you can participate in. The observing awards cover all kinds of areas of astronomy and consists of viewing a list of things and being rewarded for that by getting a certificate or potentially a pin as well. The program awards are a little bit different. There's two of them, Outreach, which has been around for a few years now, has been really successful. And now we have the Library Telescope Award. So this involves participating in outreach or library telescope activities, which I'll describe in a few minutes. And again, reaching certain levels and being awarded a certificate and then a pin. Now, in order to participate in this program and get a pin and the certificates, you have to be a member of the Astronomical League. So you can be a member through a club that is a member of the Astronomical League, or you can be a member at large. So either way, it can be done. But you need to be a member to participate in these programs. And if you want to do that, you want to become a member, you can go to the Astronomical League's website, and there's more information about becoming a member. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Library Telescope program. Basic idea is a library buys the telescope and lends it out to adult patrons, much like a book. It's a simple concept, but I'll tell you, a lot of libraries don't know anything about it. And that's kind of hard to understand because the program's been around a while, but although it's been successful, it just doesn't have as much coverage as one would think it would have. And it's typically the Orion 4.5-inch Star Blast reflector with some modifications. So the Library Telescope program started in 2008. The New Hampshire Astronomical Society got this going, and the telescope and the modifications were proposed by Mark Stobridge, who is sort of the father of the Library Telescope program. And to my knowledge, there are currently nearly 500 libraries across the United States in 44 states that participate in the program. Now, there may well be more. We keep finding more almost every day. So there are libraries that are doing this, and we just haven't come across them yet. So we have a list on the librarytelescope.org website where we can list the libraries, and we really would like to know how many there are, because it's a good thing. The more there are, the more weight we maybe pull with vendors and such. Okay, so what does the library need? What help do they need in doing this? Well, first of all, they need to understand that the program exists and how it works a little bit. That's important because they don't know. And my experience is if I can get to a decision maker at a particular library and explain the program to them, they understand how good it can be. And I've dealt with enough libraries now, I can tell you it's extremely successful with patrons. They also need help with modifying the telescope and then showing the staff and the patrons how to handle the telescope, how to move it around, and then how to use it. And then, of course, promoting the program. And I'll talk a little bit how all that'll be done. The Astronomical League's primary objective is to promote the science of astronomy. Now, what better way to do that than to make a reasonably high quality yet relatively inexpensive telescope available to the public? You know, I think that's a huge thing. If every library had a library telescope, and some of them have 3, 4, and 5 of them, you know, I know when I was a kid, my parents bought me a telescope, and I think a lot of you guys probably have the similar experience that they bought me a telescope and I couldn't get the darn thing to work, and I got frustrated and I didn't look at a telescope for another 20 years. And I thought I just couldn't do it. I didn't know how to do it. I wasn't smart enough, couldn't handle it. Turned out it was a piece of garbage. It was one of those department store telescopes, and it didn't work very well. And it really wasn't my fault, but that's the kind of thing that I think a lot of people have experienced. And here we'd have a telescope that is perhaps not on the quality of an amateur astronomer, but a pretty reasonably high quality yet inexpensive scope. Okay, so how would this work normally? I mean, a lot of times it's the club project, and that works well because especially if you're going to do a lot of libraries, you have different skill sets. But it can be done as a single person doing it. There's been a lot of examples of that. Although I can tell you the Bill Bogardus, who was a former president of the Astronomical League, who passed away fairly recently, used to say, "Many hands make for light work." He used to say that all the time, and he's right. So the more people involved, the easier the whole process is. Okay, the modifications. I'm going to go through this quick, so we'll have further, future sessions. We'll go into more detail of this. So if you look at this picture, number one is a rope that attaches the cover and the cap for the eyepiece are attached so that you don't lose them. So the idea here is keep it simple, keep it so people can't lose things. There's a zoom lens, number 5, that's attached, and that's either glued in or screwed in with like an Allen wrench screw, so it can't be taken out. And the whole idea there is, you don't want them putting in and taking out eyepieces because they'll drop them, they'll lose them. This way, it's all self-contained. The viewfinder is an easy finder, and if you're familiar with that, it's got a lithium battery that's a bit of a pain in the neck to change out. It's one of those flat batteries. So one of the modifications that's sometimes done is to make it so that you can put regular, I think it's AA batteries in, and makes it a lot easier to swap them out. But it does leave a wire exposed that could get pulled. So, I mean, there's ups and downs in doing this. You can't see it in this picture, but at the bottom of the telescope, it is a reflector. It's got a mirror at the bottom, and you have collimation screws that people could mess with. So the original design was to cover that, and so that people couldn't get to them. You had to drill holes in the barrel and attach a covering over it. What I have found is that people don't mess with them. I put a little sticker on there that says, "Please don't touch these screws," and people don't. So it works out pretty good. There's also decals. You'll see, you can't see it too well on this one, but there's a "Do not look at the sun," and there's several other decals that we typically put on. So another thing is doing maintenance. The library needs some help with people doing the maintenance, replacing the viewfinder battery if it is the lithium battery, realigning the viewfinder. People tend to mess a little bit with the knobs and wind up bringing it out of alignment, tightening the screws, checking the wire, the strings, the ropes that are attaching things, and of course cleaning the eyepiece lens. So there's certainly stuff to do there. Moving around with the telescope, you can see on the left you've got the seat belt, you got the lap belt across the bottom, and then the shoulder belt across the tube with the tube pointed up like that. It's a pretty good way to do it. It's not going to save it, perhaps in an accident, but in regular driving, this will keep it pretty steady. The other picture on the right-hand side is carrying it. I call this the football hold. So you put it into the bend of your arm there at your elbow, and you pull it to your body, and you've got it pretty well secured. And you've got an arm free to open doors, stiff arm, people get in the way, things like that. Okay, next we've got a flyer that was recently put together by another former president of the Astronomical League, John Goss. And this lays out the idea behind the program, gives you something to hand out to people, perhaps to libraries or to people during outreach, that you could give it to them and they could take a look at it and maybe bring it to their library and ask them to do it. There's a little spot on the bottom to put your name and email or phone number, whatever, that you want to put on there to be contacted. It also has the website for librarytelescope.org, which has an abundance of information in there. And then there's also a Facebook page, Library Telescope, where there's information there as well. So there's a lot of ways that people can find out about this, but this could, give you a direct link to the library and have them come to you to ask questions. The Astronomical League has a drawing annually where they give out up to 11 telescopes to clubs, participating clubs or members at large, and they then donate them to a library and help support that library run the program. And this is made possible by the donations from the Herkheimer Charitable Foundation. Okay, the Library Telescope Award. There's a silver award and then a gold award. The silver award requires 20 hours of library telescope activities, and for that you get a certificate. I'll explain what those activities are in a second. Then you can get the gold award, where you do an additional 80 hours of library telescope activities for a total of 100, and then you get a certificate and the pin. That green picture there is the pin. And I don't have the pins yet. They've been ordered. I think getting them usually takes about 2 months, and perhaps with the issues we're having with the virus, it may take a little longer because they're coming from overseas. So I'm thinking I'll have them hopefully by November, and we'll start issuing them at that point. Now the start dates for the, what dates can you use to put onto the submission? So it can start as of July 2015. So that's 5 years back. And we did that because we knew a lot of people had been working on this, and they deserve to be recognized for that. So I'm expecting a lot of people to put in, make submissions and get this award, hopefully a whole bunch by the end of the year. But if you can put it in right now, if you go to there's a link later on, you'll see that will take you to the Astronomical League observing programs, and tells you pretty much everything I've said here, but also it has a link to the submission form where you place your time and what you did to account for the hours. Now, the one thing that you can't do is to use hours for this as well after you've used them for the outreach award. You can't use the same hours for both. It's got to be separate hours. Okay, and I've only had about 10 people do submissions so far, so I'm expecting a lot more, and hopefully after this we'll start to see more. Okay, so what's a library telescope activity? So promoting the library telescope program to libraries and the general public. So getting libraries to understand what the program is, how it works, and then also the general public, telling them, because they can then turn around and go to their libraries and talk them into starting a program. And explaining the library telescope program to libraries. What does it entail? There's a lot of information out there. Librarytelescope.org has all kinds of videos, all kinds of explanations of various things. And it takes some explanation. If you think about it, people if you're an amateur astronomer, you have a telescope, you're comfortable with it, but the libraries aren't. And they generally, are nervous about it, thinking it's much more expensive than it really is, thinking it's much more fragile than it is. How are they going to deal with getting things done? So explaining that whole thing to them is a big deal. Modifying the library telescope. So the modifications I talked about, and I know I went through that real quick, but any modifications that you're doing, that's a library telescope activity as well. Instructing the library staff in the care and use of the library telescope. So, the library staff needs to know how to carry the telescope, how to move it around, and it's a good thing for them to know how to actually use it so that they can answer questions from patrons as they come in. And that usually is a short amount of time to show them. And then doing the same thing with the library patrons, perhaps a little more emphasis on the use of the telescopes. And that can be a lot of fun. I've done that quite a bit. And, at first I thought, you show the parents how to do it. Because a lot of times as parents with their kids come. And, but if you do that, the kids are getting bored. And the parents, are worried about the kids and whatnot. So I learned real fast that you show the kids. And the kids will show the parents. So anytime you're doing that, making a presentation, at a library for the library patrons, that's part of the activities. Doing periodic maintenance on the telescope. That's important because people tend to fiddle a little bit with the finder scope, so it usually gets out of alignment, has to be fixed, and making sure that the ropes and the wires are still in place so that nothing gets lost. Okay, and then participating in library star parties. This can be a lot of fun, and it kind of depends on the library. I've done them at places that were pretty good, and I've done them at places that were absolutely horrible to do, just because of the surrounding lights and whatnot. There's one that I've done them at. It's a great library, but it's right across the street from a train station, so it's very bright. But there's another one I did that is the building kind of blocks all the street lights. It can be fairly dark. And really get a good looking sky. So you do a library star party, you bring a couple of other telescopes along with a library telescope, and you show people the sky, and then also, they look at a really big telescope, and then they look at this one and see that it isn't that hard to use. So it's a good learning experience for people. Okay, these are various links that are things that probably most of them I've mentioned already, but the Astronomical League has some of them. Some of them are at the Library Telescope website, the Facebook page, and we do have a YouTube channel. So please go to that. And if you subscribe to it, we'd really appreciate that because we need a certain number of people subscribed in order to get a better name other than that link you see at the bottom. From this, you can get to the Library Telescope flyer that I mentioned before, all kinds of information and such. And I'm going to post this on the Facebook page, and so you'll be able to get to this a lot easier than So don't try to write this down now. It'll be readily available to you after. Okay, I think I'm within my 20 minutes, pretty close to it. And we're really looking forward to answering some questions. So Don, do we have any questions yet?
Let's see. So this is Don Fick, and I'm with the work with the team here, and I'm based in St. Louis. Mostly so far, I'm getting some questions or maybe more comments about nice telescope setup. Okay, here we got one. Yeah, there's some questions basically from one of the folks who works a lot with the libraries about libraries needing to know to check for batteries and if making sure they do that fairly regularly, and to make sure that the books and the headlamps and things like that are on the accessories bag. Those are important little things I think we have to really explain to libraries, because they usually just check books in, and there's some parts of this that you really have to kind of watch for. Is that right? So let's see what else.
Yeah, that's important stuff. I mean, I can tell you, I I've been to libraries where you can see that the library, the battery's been dead probably for months, and nobody really noticed, and nobody really understood how the viewfinder works anyway. So there's a little red dot on it, and that's not working. And it's, if you think about it, it's so easy for people not to turn that off, because you don't, like with me, with my telescope, that battery probably lasts me 6 months to a year. And because I'm sure I'm turning it off and putting it away because I'm removing it from the telescope. So here you're not. So
Right.
you've turned it on. You don't think about turning it off because you're not removing it. So I very easily see that battery, running down, and somebody needs to know. So I recommend that when it's checked in, they look at it, and when it's checked out, they make sure it's working. And I
Right.
also recommend that they have, 5, 10 batteries sitting around so that they can replace them as needed. But
Right.
all the other things as well. And it's funny though, I've been to libraries where, I usually try to get there every 3 months, and just to do the maintenance on it. And maybe I'm there for a different reason and I'll get a chance to look at it. But so there are libraries you go in and everything's perfect after 3 months. And that amazes me. I mean, I really expect there to be a problem. And sometimes there aren't, and sometimes everything is a problem. So
Right.
definitely important to do that maintenance.
Okay, so I've got actually several questions. We have some folks, by the way, on the actual Zoom account here tonight, as well as on Facebook. One of the questions off of Facebook is, is it better to bring your own telescope to a star party? In other words, they have a smaller factor they like to use when they're doing solar system ambassador outreach. Is it better to bring your own telescope or just work with the library telescopes? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, usually you try to get a few telescopes. And so, yeah, a bigger telescope is great. People can look through, I mean, I have a 12-inch Dob, and that's, they love that, right? And then and the views aren't really comparable, perhaps, not as good a view through the library telescope, but it's good to have it there. And, showing people that it exists, and that and how to use it. So, maybe they come for the star party, and seeing the library telescope may not be the primary reason for coming, but it's there, and they, and then they understand that, hey, I can borrow that. I can take that home with me. That's a big deal. People really, some people are terrified of the telescope. It's really pretty funny. They think it's incredibly expensive and that they're going to destroy it, and they're going to be in all kinds of trouble. But once you get them a little bit comfortable with it, and it's really easy to use, especially if you're trying to look at the moon, or, Jupiter or Saturn. I can show a 10-year-old kid, at least a motivated 10-year-old kid,
Mhm.
how to use this thing in 10 minutes. I mean, and they can look at things. And it's not only what they see and enjoy, but it's the sense of accomplishment that they get as well by being able to do this by themselves. It's really pretty cool.
Great. So another question we have is a lot of folks, maybe they've never approached the library and they're wondering what happens if how their library is going to think about this from a budget point of view. Have you seen money as an issue for libraries to get into the program?
Pretty rarely. Usually, I mean, it's not that expensive. Just ballpark numbers. I mean, there's different ways of doing it, but I usually tell people it's about $350 to get it up and going. And that includes buying the telescope, buying the zoom eyepiece, buying a couple of books, maybe a planisphere, maybe a moon map, something to put them in, and that's assuming that somebody is modifying the telescope for you. You can buy a modified telescope through a company called Cornerstones of Science. Now, it's a little more expensive, but there isn't, and part of that is shipping, right? I mean, the telescopes get shipped to them, they have to then ship it to you. So it kind of makes sense that it'd be more expensive, and they do the modifications. But as I said, the modifications aren't really totally standardized. So, it's the person who's going to help the library. It's nice if they do the modifications just so that they can, are comfortable with what was done, and can deal with it. But
Okay, so
so
we have another Facebook question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. We have another Facebook question here about what about binoculars, library binoculars, and say solar scopes? Are those things that people are checking out or that are part of this program?
Well, yeah, I think I don't think that's been spread around as much, but I know, Don, you've worked on this, putting together binoculars with libraries, a very reasonable pricing. Again, you can find out more about this on the librarytelescope.org website. And, binoculars are probably the best first telescope you could have, right? I mean, if you're going to buy a telescope, buy a pair of binoculars and get started and see if you like it. And you can use them for birding or other things as well. So I know there is a package deal that can be had to buy a library, call it a library binocular program. And it kind of makes sense. It's kind of maybe a first step towards the telescope, or maybe it's as far as some people want to go. So yeah, that's something that I think is going to become more popular because it's less expensive than the telescope and probably less likely to have problems with it, right? You don't have a finder scope. There's a lot of things you don't have with it on it. So yeah, I see that as growing, a lot in the future.
So we have another question. This one's actually from Zoom. How long do these telescopes last?
I have one at a library for 5 years, and it was the first library I got involved with, and it had a little damage. They had I replaced the zoom eyepiece for them. But what they had done is they had left it on a table in the library to let people see it and get used to it. And I didn't think that was a good idea, but they did it anyway. And sure enough, somebody, probably some kid just sort of messing with it and pulled off the piece of the zoom eyepiece. So there can be damage to it. And they also had another thing that went wrong. There's three legs at the bottom of the base. They're maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. They got broken off. I don't know how the heck they did that, but I was able to fix that real easy. So in the 5 years that this library had it, there really wasn't that much damage to it. I mean, they stopped putting it out on a table in the library. They kept it away from anybody walking by to touch it, and that solved the problem with the zoom lens. And people tend to be very careful with this. People are going to take this out. They appreciate the quality of it, and they treat it well. I mean, I'm not saying everybody does, and I'm not saying you couldn't, somebody could drop it the first time it goes out. That's certainly possible. But I've heard 5 to 8 years is probably a reasonable lifetime for it. But, in those 5 to 8 years, there's probably going to be damage that needs to be done. Think about the viewfinder could be broken, right? That's plastic. You could bang that against something that could come off. I guess you could drop it and break the mirror. I guess that's possible. It is a delicate instrument, so people got to be careful with. But I think the people who borrow it are going to be careful with it generally.
So another question is, what's the typical checkout time for telescopes, library telescopes?
I've seen typically 1 week or 2 weeks. And the libraries like to have it change hands, so, I mean, and I get that. I mean, that's a function of the value they're getting from it. So I've seen a lot of 1 week times, but I have seen people do it for 2 weeks as well. And usually they have a list, they have a line up of people reserving it. I had one library, they wanted to do 2 telescopes. And I was like, really, are you sure? Why don't you start with 1 and see, no, we want to do 2. And within a month, they were back at me and said, "Oh, we just bought a 3rd one. You want to come in and help us with that one too?" We've got people lined up for the next 4 months. We got to get another one so we can get people to use it, so they don't have to wait so long. So it can be extremely popular and extremely successful. So I think the 1 week is just to get it out to as many people as possible. And if there aren't a lot of people taking it out, you could probably get a 2nd week. But generally, I think that's the limit.
So we have another
question. Is that
question.
what you run into, Don?
Was that?
Is that yours?
So we have another question here from Facebook about COVID-19, about right now touching the eyepiece and social distancing and things like that. What's going on with that right now with programs that you're aware of, at least?
Yeah, my experience is that the interaction with the library and the interaction with the patrons is virtually non-existent. Some of the libraries are lending out the library telescope. And I had talked to a few libraries early on, and I said, well, before you send it out the first time, wipe it all on the outside, wipe it, and then don't touch the zoom eyepiece, but wipe it with an alcohol uh, swab, and then make sure it sits, for 3 to 7 days between people taking it out. When it comes in, you wipe it down again, and you leave it there for 3 to 7 days. Originally, I said 7, and it wound up, most of them, I think, are doing 3 or 4 between borrows. The other thing is suggesting that they only use it within their family group so that they're not potentially spreading the virus, because looking through an eyepiece is a perfect way to spread it, right? It can be spread to the eyes. So having multiple people's eyes up against the eyepiece, could certainly spread it. Now, I did have a library that purchased a telescope right before the quarantine hit here in New York, where I live, back in March. And I was actually set to go there the next week, and then everything got shut down. So things started to open up, and I went to them and modified the telescope. And then I said, well, let's do the staff training. And we did it by Zoom. So it worked out pretty well. Fortunately, we were trying to record it, but it didn't work. So we don't have a recording of it. But I think that's a good thing, to do the interaction that you need to do with the staff and with the patrons could be done through Zoom. Certainly not as good as doing it in person. And hopefully we get back to a normal world soon. I don't know how soon, but hopefully within 6 to 12 months. I don't know. Hopefully soon.
So we still have a couple more questions. I do want to make a plug that if you have checked out a telescope, or you're working with a library that's checking out telescopes to patrons, that they can go to librarytelescope.org, and the YouTube channel is up at the upper right. You just click on that little icon, it'll take you to a channel. We've had at least some great videos put together that will explain how to use the red dot finder, how to align the telescope in terms of just finding something in the sky and things like that. These are short videos. It won't take you long to go through it, but absent of COVID, with COVID really right here, and absent being able to do in-person star parties. And I will say also that a lot of the clubs that I'm involved with right now are doing social distancing star parties. They won't let you look at a telescope, but they'll maybe point the stars out through a star party, or do a presentation on stellarium through virtual programming or something like that. So the whole point is, once the folks get the telescope at home, how do they learn how to actually use it? So there's resources either virtual or through the website, YouTube kinds of things. So I got a comment here actually from Mark Stobridge. He's the guy that you talked about earlier, and he says he's got telescopes that he's had for over 10 years without problems. We have another question. This one's actually from St. Louis about, do all the libraries that have a scope already have a rep, or should someone approach to be a local contact for info repairs? And I would say for St. Louis, we have about not quite 200 telescopes. We work with about 30 libraries. And so we have a somewhat of an organized repair system where they can contact in St. Louis, the metro St. Louis area, a central point. And then we basically have people that are trained to take care of this in different clubs. We have 4 clubs in the metro St. Louis area. And I think there's probably a similar example in other areas, other metro areas, where there's a person that has probably helped build the telescopes and is familiar with that, maybe a science teacher. But for the most part, we found that there are some pieces that are kind of maybe hard to figure out from an astronomy point of view. You have to know a little bit about that, but most of them are pretty simple. Like replacing a book is pretty simple. Putting a new sticker back on is pretty simple. And so there's some instructions on the website about where to get the parts. If you look under how to get started kind of thing, there's a whole admin section, and there's a whole even a parts list really that they put together of where to get a lot of the parts. So it's all out there. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, and also I think Mark Stobridge is adding, you can wipe the eyepiece cup with the alcohol. You don't need to touch the lens. Yeah, so anyway, that's just thought on that. And I would say there's another question about, do you see a lot of damage to scope that require expensive repair? What about you, Tom? Have you seen much of that?
No, the worst I've seen is breaking off one of the legs, which I still
Yeah,
don't know how
that's
they did that. But I have heard stories of, I know one library that somebody borrowed it and never came back. They never saw him again. That's very rare.
yeah.
Um, Other times I know they've taken pieces apart, um, and fortunately this telescope is very easy to work with. Due to it's so small, I guess, and um, like I had a problem with somebody dropped some stuff into it, and it was on the mirror, and you hate to touch the mirror, but they were, I don't even know what it was, to be honest, but I actually wound up taking the mirror out and just able to get the stuff off pretty easily, put it back, and it seems to be fine. Um, so yeah, I really haven't seen any significant damage. I know it probably has happened, but I think it's pretty rare.
Yeah, I would say we've had certainly some issues in St. Louis, but for the most part, I think with as many telescopes as we have out, and you have to remember that they're probably being checked out, 20 times a year. So if you think about how often something new is like that, like if you buy one, you might use it 3 or 4 times maybe, but these telescopes year after year are getting checked out regularly, and by people not really understanding how to use telescopes. So that's quite amazing. Well, I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping up here. See if there's any other big questions here. We're getting some thanks. Great program. Good job, Tom. I think that you've certainly done a great job walking through this. And by the way, the nice thing about for those of you on Facebook is that this will be recorded, and you'll be able to see and replay this later. So share this with your friends, and we will also put we'll chop down the video and make it to where it's pretty distinct and put that out on our YouTube page. So if you go to our YouTube page, it'll be out there in a few days as well. So I think unless there's any other questions, let's go ahead and wrap up. We've probably taken a little bit more time than we allocated, but I really appreciate you guys joining us. And Tom, wonderful job walking us through this. And thanks for taking on this Library Telescope Award program. I know that's going to take off right now with COVID. It's a little hard to kind of get your mind around doing some outreach or thinking about that, but some people have been doing some really terrific outreach, and I think this will be a fun way for them to be recognized.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I mean, I am extremely pro library telescopes, and I'm going to retire next year, maybe, and maybe I'll do this full time. I really love doing it. I'm looking forward to dealing with more and more libraries, and I hope it spreads, even further, much further than it has already, which has been extremely successful.
Okay, I guess we'll sign
Thanks,
off.
everybody.
I guess we'll go ahead and sign off here. I guess the one last thing is that we do have another program. We're going to try to do these programs on the third Wednesday of each month at 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. And I think the next program we will be a little bit focusing on how to launch a library telescope program. And we'll work out the details, the specifics of that. So just kind of put that on your calendar and watch it on the Facebook page. And hopefully we'll start getting the word out, and certainly tell your friends about this program and some of the great work that's being done by a lot of the volunteers out there. Thanks, Tom, once again. And any last comments before we head off?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, well, thanks to everyone for joining us, and join us next month. I think it's October 21st, that Wednesday. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Okay, we stop live streaming now. Good job. That was a really nice job, Tom. Very nice job.
Whew. I don't know. I felt like I was rambling for a while.
Oh, no, you did really good. You kept a nice, good pace, and I was kind of trying to stimulate the questions out there, and it's pretty typical. They start coming along after a bit. We actually had a lot of, Maynard, by the way, was on here, and he said, great job.
Oh, good.
And Mark was on there giving us a lot of advice about the telescopes and things like that. So this is good stuff.
Yeah, no, this is, it's so easy too. I mean, it's 20 minutes. God, I can barely say hello in 20 minutes. So you just get started talking and.
Well, I think the good thing though is, 20 minutes is a good time frame. The one thing I've learned personally on this is that if you talk an hour, you have no idea if you talked about what they wanted to hear. But if you talk for 20 minutes and let them ask questions, they're going to drive the rest of the conversation. And that is really good. That's good advice, because you have no idea what they're even thinking out there, right? So when they start asking questions, like some of the stuff, I mean, some of these were people that do the program, they're to give us advice, but there are also good questions about, how it works, and that's good.
How many people were there?
We had, I believe on Facebook, we probably got about 18, 19, and then on Zoom, we had about 8 or so, give or take some.
Oh, that's
That,
pretty
that was,
good then.
I think they may have included us as well, but that was
Yeah.
still a good turn. And a lot of people I know just know from history that a lot of people will not be able to watch it right now, but over the next day or two, they'll continue to watch it and play it. They'll see it, and it's a short program, so it won't take them that long to go through it.
Yeah.
Awesome
All
job.
right. So
Awesome job.
yeah, sounds good. I mean, I'm enjoying doing it too, so that's great.
All right. Looks like John's going to head out. I've had a long day too, sir. I'm going to head out. This has been one of those crazy days. So it seems like I got up early and I've been going. So, hey, good
Okay,
job.
guys, take care. Thanks for
You,
your help. Appreciate it.
you want us to work together on this thing with Mark, or what do you want to do? Or you think we should get Mark to do this, or just kind of start working on it and let him see if he wants to take it over, kind of thing? What's your thinking?
I don't want to insult him, I mean, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like, I'm just not convinced he's going to do it. I mean, this is not going to be hard to put together. I mean, this is going to
No,
be
no, it's not. No,
pretty straightforward. I mean, it could really just be almost a conversation with half a dozen slides or a dozen slides.
well, I would think,
Mm.
15 slides would be plenty. In other words, if you had a couple on what the program's about, because a lot of people really don't understand how it works. They just, I mean, just the question I had from a library over in Illinois, like, so like you guys rent them to us, or how does that work? Or do we own them, or do we buy them? Where do we buy them? I mean, that's the basic questions and then what happens if they break, And that's
Yeah.
when you can say that, well, this is where the amateurs can help you a little bit, because it's a pretty simple telescope, right? I mean, by the way, that was so funny. I don't know if you saw the question, John Goss. One of your slides has the red dot finder backwards. Did you see that? That's a trick question.
I use that deliberately,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just because virtually very few people notice it.
yeah,
And do you know whose telescope it was?
yeah. John Goss is here.
Yeah, it was in his kitchen. And he would prefer that picture never be seen.
Yeah.
But I use it at every opportunity because it's like somebody will say, hey,
You ought to put a little John Goss's telescope here. John Lotus's telescope.
but I'll tell you, when those viewfinders first came out, we were at one of our astronomy meetings, and there was some people there that had tremendous experience, and we're looking at it, and somebody had bought one, and they got it on a telescope. We're just, geez, how does this work? And we're looking at it, and this woman comes over who was brand new to the club, had maybe, I think she had a telescope for like 2 months, but she had this kind of viewfinder, and she says, oh no, you got that backwards. And we all felt like idiots. I mean, I wasn't as experienced as some of the other guys, but it was like, wow, what are we, morons? Why couldn't we do this?
Yeah, what would be fun? What would be fun is to get a giveaway, some giveaway, and say, okay, anybody that can find a problem with the telescopes the telescopes in this video, let us know, and your name goes into a hat. Whoever will draw out of the hat the names of the people who submitted this, but you have to get it right, and then you can start buzz social media. And that would be really good. I mean, it would be funny because people will really look through there to say what was wrong, where is it?
Yeah.
That would be
But
fun.
John is highly embarrassed by that
Is he?
picture. I think that's the one that went into I think it was in the Sky and Tell article.
Oh my
I
gosh!
think it is. I know it's in
Oh my
something.
gosh! No kidding.
Yeah. But it doesn't it doesn't say where it is. But I've used that, and I've said, what's wrong with this picture, and then people would come back and or even if I don't mention that there's something wrong, somebody will come back and say something, and my answer will be, and that's exactly why you need an amateur astronomer to help them. That's the reason.
That is good.
It is pretty funny. I don't know
All
what else
right.
we could do.
Well, good job, Tom. And
All right, well, thanks.
I'll try to get this maybe tomorrow. I've got an IDA board meeting I've been working on like nuts here, so I'll try to get it done tomorrow as far as get it out to YouTube. But it should play on on Facebook, you can start promoting that. You know, it doesn't take long. It's really replayable probably by now already. So that'll be fun. And it should have only went live once I, you know, that couple minutes before, you know, that's, so it won't be all of our pre-chat won't be in there.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Take care.